But he just feels threatened. He's openly gay. He feels threatened, so he's trying to like threaten other people by showing them the toy. It's a toy to him, and I'm just like, I don't know if that's really appropriate. But anyway, he does.
Other people are feeling threatened. There may be something that administration can do in that.
Right.
If he's really truly not in a threatening situation, but yet he's threatening other people, he could be in violation of something else, not necessarily just specific to the carrying of that, but almost like a bullying kind of situation.
Anyway, thank you. I just was really curious to know how you guys feel about somebody just walking around showing, look what I've got. I brought to school today.
It's concerning.
It is.
Yeah, that was a firearm when he did that. He could be charged with brandishing.
Yeah. So I just haven't classified that really as deadly as I think that they should be classified. Education. Oh, sorry. Is there more?
No, I just had a quick question. What are the restrictions to law enforcement on the use of the taser? Are there any, or is it just?
Very little restriction in
Yeah.
terms of their use, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure you've heard about the case here, where the man was killed.
Increasingly, law enforcement agencies are trying to develop some sort of policies, internal policies about their use. And that's definitely something that we have encouraged, that there be some guidelines, but they're, under the law, I don't think.
It's agency to agency. It's
Okay.
each individual agency governs their own rules over that. They train them, but, as we've seen, it's not always
Right.
applicable to the situation. Education and low income, Jen and I are kind of going to tag team a little bit on this because the league and my organization have both worked on a lot of these. Common Core, we're going to see this again. There was an interesting article in the Tribune. I would suggest you read it. Just Saturday, I think it was, that was talking about. They had done a study. So the governor had assigned not really a task force, but like a study committee, and these were concerned parents. Many of them were vocal opponents of Common Core, so they were clearly known as being adamantly against Common Core. This federal, lefty, liberal indoctrination, right down the line on that. They all came out and basically said we didn't find anything wrong with it. There were a couple of questions that they said, well, I'd like them to be worded a little bit differently. We'd like evolution to be called a theory as well as what's the opposite of evolution? Creation. They said you're calling creation a theory, but you're calling evolution a science, so we want them both to be called a theory. But really very, very little. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how this is a brand new study, so it's going to be very interesting to see how this filters into the legislature. Because I think a lot of the ones that have been very opposed to it were waiting for this and hoping that they would then say, well, see, all these parents and this was awful. And with almost exception about the only thing they found were grammatical errors and syntax, and just silly things.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see what they do with it.
I'm sorry, I want to make, does everybody know what Common Core means? Is that familiar?
No, I don't.
Just start to elaborate a little bit more.
So it's a series of, it's a testing mechanism. So, if you're going to have concerns about it, I'd have more concerns about the fact that we just keep adding more testing mechanisms for our kids. That's really where the problem comes. And even after this report, a lot of the teacher, or a lot of the parents involved in this said the same thing, that, okay, I got through all of the questions, there was something like 12,000 questions. It's a ridiculous number of questions, huge. And they do it in chunks. So it's not like just sit down and do this one test. But a lot of these parents are saying it's not that we necessarily had problems with the question, but we really need another testing mechanism for these kids. I have a daughter in grade school, and it seems like every other week there's some new testing thing that they're going through. And we know they're grading schools on these things, they're grading teachers on these things. So I would encourage you, especially if you're interested in education, to educate yourself more about that element of it. Because the Common Core itself, the series of questions that are involved in this particular test, aren't the concern. The concern is that we just keep piling in more testing mechanisms, and a lot of it, really, we're grading teachers on the wrong thing, we're grading schools on the wrong things, and we're still leaving the low-income and the disadvantaged schools for lost.
If I could add just one thing about Common Core. There's a lot of misconceptions about Common Core. The opponents of Common Core have been really good about getting these out there. There's the testing, and there are sort of suggestions. If you want to teach this, you might be able to use X. You might read this book. None of that is required. So if they say that, well, this book is completely inappropriate for an 8th grade common courses, they have to read it. That is always untrue. Additionally, I've been watching a particular representative who is being threatened by the Republican Party that they'll take him out of convention, the whole count my vote thing, because he supports Common Core. And so there is an organized effort to get representatives and senators not to support Common Core, and they're actually being threatened in convention if they do support it. And I don't know about you, the League is a nonpartisan organization. We're just like our representatives to think about issues and vote the way their constituents want, not how a particular party wants them to.
Or a special interest group. The Eagle Forum is very opposed to the Common Core, not because they know anything about the actual Common Core, but because they think it is a federally mandated, liberal
And
indoctrination tool.
the caucus system allows them to organize that in that manner. So,
Jim?
I think I'm going to talk education. But, okay, go.
I just have a question. Does this stuff address how the individual school districts determine the kind of programs they offer to the students and to the teachers? Is that something that would be?
I mean, it does indirectly, because the schools, especially if the schools are being graded based on the outcome of these tests, then you find that the schools will be focused on making sure that the students do well on these
Right.
tests, because funding, accolades, higher grades, in this A, B, C, D, E, F grade thing that they've got going on, all come back to this testing. But they're not directly requiring certain people.
Well, I'm not specifically thinking about with the testing, but I'm thinking like with other programs like trainings that educators are required to take. Is that something that would be mandated by legislation, or is that just based on the school district?
Not Common Core legislation.
Yeah.
Education funding would, and I hate to skip this, but this takes us right into education funding.
Oh,
Because education funding and programs that are, what's the word I'm looking for, earmarked, and how education is funded would have more to do with that. Now, education funding since 1993, do you all know that your income taxes are constitutionally mandated to go towards education? Okay, but unfortunately, a number of years ago, they were supposed to go from K to 12, but a number of years ago, higher ed has been allowed to dip into that fund. So that's part of, since 1993 to the present, education funding has been dropping specifically. And also, legislators have a tendency, or can, do earmarks for special projects. One of the most entertaining one was kindergarten on computer. We didn't really need interaction that a computer could do kindergarten. Not thinking that most kindergartners really.
No socialization.
No socialization, yeah.
But that's, so essentially, you understand earmark, there's a bucket of money. And that's supposed to go to education, and a lot of it is based on what the districts are allocated so much money. But when they have an earmark, they'll just take a chunk out of the middle of that. So it doesn't come from another place, it comes right out of the same education bucket, and they say, well, now we're going to provide X number of computers for these special labs, or there's going to be this online element, or this or that. All of that keeps eroding the education budget. So in addition to higher ed dipping into it, we have these special earmarks that keep dipping into it. That amount that actually goes to the class, to the teachers, to the kids, keeps getting smaller and smaller. This year, there's going to be a lot of attention on education funding.
Good.
There's going to be good ideas and there's going to be bad ideas. We don't really know for sure yet, but we've had some ideas. Senator Pat Jones from Salt Lake area has a proposed education funding bill that is about eliminating your your personal exemptions on your state income tax. And so, in turn, essentially, you would pay a higher tax. You wouldn't get that money back. You would get credit for your 1, 2, 3, 7, 12 kids. Good idea, bad idea. I mean, there's a lot of, there's pros and cons to that. It's a on what we have heard so far and what we think we're looking at, make sure you check on our websites and the bills that we're doing, because there's going to be, like I said, there's going to be a lot of education funding. Make sure you see if we've got a, like a thumbs up or a thumbs down on them, because some things sound really good, and then you read a little deeper, and you find out a little bit more, and you find out that it's either a bunch of earmarks that money's coming in, or it's a bait and switch, so money's really just being shifted from some other need, usually low income or health and human services, to funnel into this. The governor, we've had so much attention on education funding the last little while that this is going to be a big topic this year. But it's going to be, they're going to try to confuse us because that's the easiest way to get something passed.
And if you would like a primer on education funding that just talks about just how Utah funds its education, the league has just published a study. It doesn't take a position yet because we're still working on our position on it. But it will just, in a very general way, tell you exactly where the money is coming from and where it's going. And you can find that on our website. Do you want me to take nutrition?
Sure.
Okay.
Let's get through this a little faster.
Yeah, I was going to say,
We can all talk about this after too if you have questions.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're a little passionate.
early education and nutrition, there is a very absolute link towards early education and nutrition, making sure the kids get enough to eat during the early and formative years and starting preschool. So a child who starts preschool and does get food with preschool will always do better than those who do not. Then we did see some bills last year. Senator Aaron Osmond put a bill together that died very quickly, but we were kind of happy about. So we're just going to keep an eye out for that. Project 2020 is in support of early education with nutrition as well.
And if you don't know about Project 2020, it's a program to get more college educated by 2020. Low income, some of education and low income moms goes a little bit hand in hand. But first of all, let's talk about Medicaid expansion. We know Utah has not yet decided if they're going to accept the Medicaid expansion. Most of the states around us have. Idaho has said no. Wyoming is not decided yet. Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada have all accepted it. The governor's just dragging his feet. Word has it he is probably going to accept it. It's kind of a no-brainer. It's money on the table. The money's already allocated. You're already paying it every time you pay your taxes. It's whether it comes back to the state or whether it goes to the other states that have accepted it. 126,000 Utahns need Medicaid expansion. It's crucial. We have a coalition called the Coalition for Compassionate Utah. You can go online to compassionateutah.org. You can send an email to the governor. You can say, Governor Herbert, expand Medicaid.
Right.
Simple as that. He needs critical mass to hear. He needs a critical mass of people to say this. He needs cover, because we might see a bill, depending on how much cover, depending on how important the legislature sees this as being to constituents. They could put a bill, the legislature could, to take that power out of the governor's hands. They actually talked about it last year. Didn't get anywhere, but they talked about it. So we want the governor to say it's important. We want to accept the Medicaid expansion immediately. We're late already. We're already going to leave money on the table. But it needs to happen right away. So go to that website, compassionateutah.org.
So, we haven't quite made it through all of our items, but I see that it's just a few minutes before 8, and so I know you all probably need to get home to your families and your homes. But so I just wanted to quickly throw it open and see if there are any questions that we haven't addressed, that are things that you all really care about, and or if anybody wants to take a look at the legislative website, we'd be happy to do that too individually. So please feel free. Now is the chance to ask us these burning questions if you want to know. Or if there's a specific issue here that we haven't talked about, we can hear about.
Are you okay with the, okay, go ahead.
What specific initiatives do you guys have in mind for LGBT rights and equality in Utah down here in St. George?
That's a great question. We are continuing to work with local communities here. We have a major event in May, which is the Equality Celebration, which is, if you think of it in terms of what we do up north, it's a smaller version of Allies Dinner. And with our statewide campaign, we'll be here a lot more. I should say I will be here a lot more, having conversations with candidates and with constituents to make sure we're connected to the issues and to the solutions. So you'll see me a lot more. I'm coming back. The next trip I have is in February. I'm trying to fit home in January as well, but I'll be back more often to get the ball rolling with that. But once the campaign launches in January, there'll be a full rollout that you'll see down here as well.
Awesome. I was also wondering if any of the towns down here are part of the 18 towns part of the,
Yes, there's one, and I always get it wrong. It's
Springdale.
Springdale, not Springville, Springdale.
Yeah.
Oh, good, I won't lose my job this time.
Yeah.
I would just really like to thank you all for coming down here. It just is so nice to have so many people here, and also to have our allies from the Wasatch Front to come down and really spend time with us. And hopefully you realize how important we can be down here. Emails, phone calls, letters are extremely important. I can't stress that enough. And so I would like to give you guys a round of applause before we
Anybody else? Hey, I just want to ask you, because I seen that in this one right here, your thing about t-shirts. Obviously, you can see I wear a lot